Hey everyone, this is Alex with Study with Sep, and we are going to do the five essentials, right, for the Protestant Reformation. Right, this is going to be our first time doing something like this, so please forgive me. All right, I'm not great with the camera or editing or videos or anything of that matter, so this is we're going to try this out. So basically, guys, right, this is the five things that you need to know. Okay, everything that we do in this chapter is going to revolve around these five basic things. Okay, so all right, let's take a look. The first thing, all right, that we're going to be looking at is going to be you have to know the causes of the Protestant Reformation. Protestant Reformation is a huge movement, right, that is in the 16th century and basically is going to change the religious game in Europe forever. All right, up until this point, basically Europe was one homogeneous, unified religion, and that was Roman Catholicism. Right, you had Eastern Orthodox in the West. I'm sorry, in the East. Right, but that's something different. Okay, in the West, you had the Roman Catholic Church. Right, the same Roman Catholic Church that had been around since the death of Jesus. So basically you have to know what is going to break that up, and that is going to be the Protestant Reformation. So obviously a movement this big, you have to know what the causes are. Okay, all right, make sure you are familiar with what an indulgence is. Okay, these were the slips of paper that were basically sold by the church for the remission of sin. In a nutshell, if you bought one of these for a few cents, all right, you can basically be forgiven of all sins, right? And you will get to technically go to heaven. All right, we're going to see. All right, Martin Luther is going to have a big problem with this, but more on that later. Okay, the second thing amongst with causes, you have to understand humanism and how the philosophy of humanism impacted, right, the Protestant Reformation. Okay, Christian humanists. Remember in the last chapter, all right, we learned about basically their goal was to make this life as satisfying as fulfilling as possible through the use of education and individual achievement, so on and so forth. All right, but with the Northern Renaissance thinkers, all right, they really wanted to focus in on making this life better by improving religion, improving people's religious lives through morality, through spirituality. And yes, heaven's important, but right now it's all about making this life as fulfilling as possible. And the way they saw it, right, well, that was through Christian reform. Okay. The second essential point is going to be you have to know your key figures, okay? Key figures and the movements that they inspired. Well, the most obvious one is going to be Martin Luther. All right, Martin Luther, he's going to be the one that starts the Reformation, all right, with his 95 theses, all right, basically 95 complaints, all right, that he has against the church. Mind you, most of them are going to be inspired by previous Christian thinkers. However, it's Martin Luther that is going to get this movement rolling. So that's number one. So next, right after Martin Luther, we have to look at Ulrich Zwingli. Now, mind you, there are a lot more figures that you need to be aware of, but I'm picking the three big ones, okay, that I think. Ulrich Zwingli, he's really important. He's a member of the Swiss Reformation, okay? And basically, why the reason why he's important is because while he's inspired by Martin Luther, okay, Ulrich Zwingli is going to interpret the Bible slightly differently, okay? Especially in the case of what is the Eucharist. The Eucharist, the sacrament, the pivotal sacrament in Christianity, where you're basically eating the bread and drinking the wine is supposed to represent the body and blood of Jesus Christ. It's the whole reason for the religion. Okay. Now, both Zwingli and Luther are devout Christians. They both believe in the Eucharist. The thing is, what they disagree on, right, is what it actually represents. Okay. Luther basically believes that there's some spiritual power going on inside this bread and wine, and that's what it happens to heal you. Whereas Ulrich Zwingli says there's nothing in the Bible that says that, right? He interprets the Bible literally, right? And he basically thinks that, when you take the bread, you drink the wine, you're just eating bread, you're just drinking wine, except it's a symbol of your faith, right? God told you to do it, so you do it, but no, there's no magic happening. Okay. Now, while that may seem like a trivial point, it's a big deal for the Reformation because even though they were very similar, It's this idea, it's this thing that is going to split the Reformation into two separate directions. Luther is going to go his way, right? And his branch of Christianity is going to be called Lutheranism, while Zwingli is going to go in another direction, and his is going to be called Zwinglianism, right? Zwinglianism and the Swiss Reformation are actually going to lead to an even more radical individual, and that's going to be John Calvin. John Calvin, he is going to be, one of the first like radical Christians, right? Maybe not the first, but he's definitely early. The thing is, unlike other radical forms of Protestant Christianity, Anabaptists, anti-Trinitarians, which are small in nature, okay, Calvinism is huge, okay. And why is Calvin so big? Because he interpreted the Bible different from both Zwingli and Luther, right? And his big idea is predestination. Right, the idea that you can be saved or it is decided, already determined, right, whether you're going to heaven or hell, even before you're born. Okay, so I don't want to get into too much of the theology, but again, these guys are very devout, but they're reading the Bible and they're interpreting it, right? And there's really no way that one can prove the other wrong, right? Because it's a matter of it's a question of faith. Okay, so next, you're going to have the religious fragmentation. I already alluded to a lot of this stuff, okay, with Lutheranism and Calvinism. I didn't mention Calvin, but basically that's the branch of Christianity that Calvin essentially inspires, okay? Now, the other one, however, I do want to mention is going to be called Anglicanism. Anglicanism is going to be started by the King of England, Henry VIII, right? And Henry VIII, he is going to support the Reformation, which is not new. But what is new is that he does it for purely political reasons. Henry VIII was a devout Catholic. Okay, he hated Martin Luther. He wrote letters condemning Luther and supporting the Pope. The only problem was, right, when it came to his succession, he did not have a male heir. Right, he was married to this woman, Catherine of Aragon. They were married for a while. They couldn't have children, so he wanted an annulment. The Pope wouldn't give it to him. So he basically says, oh, you know what? I'm going to support this Protestant Reformation and form my own religion and make myself the head of my own church, and I can grant myself the divorce. And that's essentially what he does. Okay. Now, why this is so important is not because necessarily, here's a guy that wants to get out of his marriage, but because, right, it is an example, the earliest example of people supporting the Reformation for purely political reasons. Okay. All right. You have to remember the church, right? The Pope, right? They're very, very, very powerful religiously, politically, and economically. Okay, and when you're that powerful, people are going to want to take some of that power away. Okay, so Henry VIII sets the tone, sets the example, right, for others to follow, right? Even if they're not really that keen on breaking away from the church for religious reasons, both economics and political power, or economic and political power, they play a lot into more support for the Reformation. Political and social impacts. You're going to have the rise of nation states. Okay. This is going to be, like we said with England, okay, very powerful, consolidated, centralized governments, right? We saw that in the last chapter. They are basically going to be consolidated and powerful enough to challenge institutions, right, like the church, okay? And a lot of these powerful states, right, not just England, not just France, but also, states in, the Holy Roman Empire, right? They are going to essentially harbor many of these reformers, right? And for some for political reasons. Okay. Increased literacy. This is a big one, right? We saw the humanist movement, the invention of the printing press. Increased literacy allows for more people to read the Bible. More people read the Bible, they start challenging and questioning traditions that the church has established for over 1,000 years. Okay, when they start doing that, the church is losing power. As such, right, because you have all these different groups breaking away from the Roman Catholic Church for one reason or another, and the questioning of its power, right? What you might be asking is the Catholic Church going to do about it? Well, the answer to that question is going to be the Catholic Reformation, or sometimes referred to as the Counter Reformation. There's going to be two major features of the Catholic Reformation, and that's going to be the Council of Trent and the establishment of the Society of Jesus. Okay, both are basically they're designed to essentially combat, right, the loss of influence that the Protestant Reformation is having on the church. So the Council of Trent, which meets from 1545 to 1563, was an ecumenical council, right, or a meeting of all the clergy called for by the Pope, right, to discuss issues of church reform. Okay, it was meant to address, right, the abuses, the corruption that a lot of these reformers were and Christian humanists were speaking about. Okay, but the other thing that it was meant to do, right, is to reaffirm the what constitutes the Catholic faith, the Catholic doctrine, right? What is the Catholic Church's response or interpretation of what the Eucharist is? What is the Catholic Church's ideas regarding the sacraments? Right? Are all seven valid, or is it like what the Protestants say, which there's only two: Eucharist and baptism, right? Basically, the Catholic Church is saying, nope, they're all seven. All seven is valid, right? All those other guys are heretics, right? I don't care what they say, right? We don't care what they say, okay? And then lastly, right, basically, they wanted to redefine the doctrine, right, what the Catholic beliefs, right, because essentially, while all these reformers are essentially espousing their different viewpoints and interpretations of the Bible, the church was mostly quiet for up until the Council of Trent, right? So people were kind of running amok until the Council of Trent basically says, nope, this is the official doctrine. This is what we stand for. This is what we believe in. And all the other guys are wrong. Okay. Building on that is going to be the Society of Jesus, right, or the Jesuits, which was started by Ignatius of Loyola. And basically, the Jesuits are going to play a critical role in essentially revitalizing the church by basically providing a spiritual and physical model of what a good Christian should be. Right. The main reasons why people started following Martin Luther and John Calvin was these guys had it together in their eyes. They were very, very faithful. They lived a very, very religious life. Right. And essentially, if people were wondering, like, what should I be doing as to be a good Christian, they provide an example. Well, the Jesuits are going to do that and then some. Okay. The Jesuits are going to emphasize a program, right, written by Sir Ignatius of Loyola, called the Spiritual Exercises, which essentially is literally that. It's a bunch of exercises dedicated to essentially make priests into like super priests. Okay, ultra faithful, ultra educated, ultra intelligent, right, and essentially make these super examples of what a Catholic church should be, right. The efforts of the Catholic Church to reinvigorate itself were very successful, but not completely successful. Okay, it doesn't basically eliminate the Protestant Reformation, but it definitely reduces its influence in a lot of areas. Moreover, right, because the Jesuits emphasized such great education, right, if you wanted to get like the top-notch, highest-level education in Europe during the 16th century, well, guess where you had to go? You had to go to a Jesuit. And while the Jesuit was basically teaching you things like Latin and grammar and philosophy and theology, and well, they were also giving you a very, 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 very heavy dose of radical Catholicism. And it's not, and this is not the era of public education. This is through private education. So the only people who are getting an education are the super, super wealthy and influential. Okay. So imagine, right, you are a super, super wealthy, influential noble, and you want your kid to have the best education possible. You're going to send him to a Jesuit, and it's going to set the stage for more radical Catholics, but this time in very, very high ranking positions, kings, princes, you name it. Okay. All right, guys, that's the 5 essentials. Make sure you know it. Make sure you know all the examples in the chapter, the vocabulary, and how they fit into these 5 main ideas. Okay. Hope this is helpful. Good luck.